Thank you, Stefan. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to Chicago. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I'd like to thank Stefan, Stacy, and of course, Lionel for all their great work that they do to help us give our clients great solutions. At Course5, we help our clients with digital transformation through the use of analytics, insights, and artificial intelligence. For our topic today, I'm going to walk you through our process and solution framework, highlight the benefits of our approach, and show you some examples of our research. Okay, so just as a quick background, and one thing I want to mention, I am not a user of BayesiaLab software, okay? You guys have done it thousands of times, I'm sure. I've done it 0 times. So I'm more of an abuser than a user. So I present results, I look at results, but in the technical aspect of it, I am not an expert, okay? So questions that you give me will have to be yes or no answers. Just kidding, okay. All right. So traditionally, we use a lot of different techniques to go through and create key driver analysis and look at associations between variables. So I'm sure you're all familiar with these, and as they go up, the importance and the robustness of them, you have correlation analysis, and you have standard linear regression, different techniques, Shapley value analysis, Johnson's relative weight, and then as we get up to the more heavily computational aspects of it, probabilistic machine learning and graphical models, as you're all aware. And so that's the futuristic that we get is that is we get more and more intense machine learning and whatnot. And the benefits of what we see here is that as the data breaks down, we can use these other techniques to help us move forward. Okay, so traditional techniques are limited to providing insights. With our extended model, we provide additional diagnostic insights, which makes the overall modeling exercise very actionable. So how do we do that? So we begin our solution framework with an exploratory analysis of any historical data that we have, or key performance indicators. In our example today, we have a few waves of previously fielded data that we look at to begin our analysis. Our next step is hypothesis building. We review our analysis of the historical data to see if there are any easily recognizable patterns or relationships in the structures of the data. And this provides the basis for hypotheses that we may explore further. In step In step 3, we take our current survey data and conduct confirmatory modeling using Bayesian networks to identify any latent factors in structure of the measured attributes. Then we take these factors and build a driver model of the key metrics. For step 4, we specify and test interrelationships of the factors based on our outcome variable and validate the model while modifying as needed. And lastly, and most importantly, what we'd love to do for our clients is build a simulator for them and use the model to let them create and understand different scenarios that may come up. So it's not just a one and done type effort. We give them a simulator, we run scenarios for them to let them explore on their own, along with us to understand what the market is doing and how they can impact the results. Okay, the benefits of our approach. So again, a lot of smart people in the room. As you know, that a lot of the causal modeling in KDA can be interpreted with data. If you have holes in your data, multicollinearity, et cetera. So with our approach, we don't need any prior assumptions. We don't need to have anything already assumed. It's pretty non-biased, and this gives us flexibility to test and modify as we gain outside information. Secondly, it provides feasibility to understand the relationships between the variables, which can impact the outcome variable. Again, this is something we don't see in traditional techniques where the multicollinearity or interrelationships are kind of nullified. As mentioned earlier by our previous speaker, the multicollinearity of the attributes is enhanced through Bayesian analysis. Unlike traditional approaches, we can have, it provides all diagnostics required to perform and extend the KDA model. So in this case, we can run, as I mentioned before, various scenarios, what-if scenarios, and this is, again, very important for our clients to be able to use the tool and gain deeper insights. And lastly, these techniques, as I just mentioned, help us to overcome the challenges within the data. So multicollinearity, missing data, nonlinearity, et cetera. Okay, so we have a case study here. This is a case study that we have a very large utility company that we run a tracking study for. We do this twice a year. The utilities company is based in the US. And the primary goal that they were looking to get is to reconnect with their customers by improving the level of their customer experience. So the objectives of our research are to, what drives customer experience? How do they vary across the defined segments? How do they achieve optimum improvement in their customer experience? What is the best possible scenario for achieving this? And lastly, what is the worst scenario they should avoid to enhance their customer experience? Okay, so a little bit about our analysis. We used the Bayesian network modeling to perform it. All the variables in the survey were evaluated for potential inclusion as independent variables in the model. And only the best variables and their underlying dimensions were extracted and included in the analysis. So, and what we were modeling on, our outcome variable, was a composite score, if you will, between satisfaction, customer trust, and customer engagement. We talked to about 1,500 folks, and we started out with 106 variables. Now, once we threw all those variables in the model came back and said, hey, there's 56 attributes that we want to put in the model. So this map shows how they're related. I mean, you guys are all very familiar with this. You can see the different groups. And the neat thing about this was that they were all related. There was no real weirdness in there. So things about reliability, outages, they all were grouped together. The various aspects that we had all mapped out well. Okay. So if we just look at one of those, this was our reliability and outages factor. And again, as I mentioned, you can see that this cluster of variables are very much related: power reliability, average number of brief outages, average number of long outages, keeping customers informed, et cetera. So those are all tied together, made a lot of sense to the client. Okay, so now what we did is we built a path model to explain how the various latent factors influence the outcome variables. We can specify and change the relationships, as I mentioned before, based on our domain understanding and working with our clients. And based on the final model, we can estimate how each individual variable and in turn the factors influence our outcome variable, which is customer experience. Okay, so this is how our model came out. What we have here is we have two factors that had direct impact on the model, as you can see there: price fairness and customer focus. Now, an interesting thing about this particular vertical industry is that price fairness, there's two things. One, most utility companies are a monopoly, correct? You just can't go down and change your utility company, buy electricity from company B versus company A. And also they're very price sensitive because they are regulated by federal and state regulators in most cases, our client is. So they can't really just double the price. So price fairness, while it's important, it's something that's very hard for them to move, okay? Now, what we also found is that there was the top three drivers were customer focus, price fairness, and integrity, which I thought was fairly interesting because, reliability and usage, if you think about it, what do you want? You want your power on, you want it working all the time. But that really wasn't a key impact on the customer experience, which I thought was fairly interesting. So again, this is the same thing. Looking at it this way, we have our two direct effects: customer focus and price fairness. And then you can see as you go on down the line. Now, one thing on this particular chart that was interesting is that if you look way down at the bottom, you see advertising and marketing awareness. So you think marketing awareness, that's going to really move the needle on customer experience. We're putting out a good message. It's all going great. No, doesn't really impact it at all. So the marketing team wasn't happy about hearing that, but at the end of the day, they understood the reasons why. Okay, so some things that we like to offer our client once we do the key driver analysis is one thing is an importance performance chart. So on this one, you can see on the y-axis, we have the importance of the various factors and then the performance that the utility company was doing on these factors. So again, as you can see, price fairness is a very high priority for folks. Their performance isn't that great, but it's super important. They're very price sensitive. You can see on the other side, on the leverage, there are quite a few opportunities there for them where they are having strengths versus the competition. Things they need to monitor as you look down the lower left-hand quadrant: alerts, things that are not that important to folks, and then maintain the reliability and outages, et cetera. Okay, now if we want to look at diving a little bit deeper. So if we want to look at the 3 key factors that are most important for driving customer experience, and how do they relate in the various areas that they have. They define their divisions by regions of the country. So if we look at the metro division, you can see fairly close to the 3 loci there, and they're not too far away, so that's not looking too bad for the metro folks. If we move on to the folks in the northeast, again, fairly close to the points there, not a lot of difference. Things are going well. When we move to the northwest, however, you can see how the price fairness, the point C is to the left, that is an issue. They need to really work on that more because their performance is low there, but it's still a very high important thing for them to do in that area. And then again, point D, same issue there. We're looking at the north central region, very similar case with the price awareness, or price fairness is very important. Going on to the southeast, hey, it's a great story there. Things are working well, you're doing really good on these 3 key metrics, so continue what you're doing there. And last but not least, again with the southeast, or southwest, excuse me, doing quite well on most of these measures. Okay, so what we wanted to do here is we wanted to give a few scenarios for our customer. So what do you need to do to achieve a 10% gain? So essentially move your rating of customer experience from 7.4 to 8.1. And as you can see here, here's some various factors that they would need to increase by certain levels to make that happen. The different factors, as you can see, is down below here, convenience, communication, etc. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's a little bit challenging to move price. So if we had to keep price the same, how much do they need to move these other levers to make the customer experience move by a significant amount? And so that's what we have here. So as you can see, not to flip back, but all these other ones have improved a little bit. They need to boost them up more so because price is so important, yet they really can't act on that. So an optimum scenario, so the variables that we saw, the attributes that we saw on the last slide, those are actually variables that we work with the client to understand, and here's the ones that you want to move. Well, in reality, those are very difficult to move. Those have, over time, all their efforts have not really moved those variables. They're hard to measure. So we came back and said, okay, well, we'll look at some things that are more substantive that we can look at. So in this particular case, we said, hey, here's some variables that we think that you can move based on your previous data that we've seen, and here's how much you should move those to make the optimum scenario to make a significant difference in your customer experience. Conversely, the worst case scenarios, what we wanted to look at was the variables that we had previously that I showed you were in the leverage area, and how they needed to avoid lowering these scores by these amounts. And these are the ones they need to focus on to make sure that that worst case scenario where they lose that significant amount of customer experience happens. Okay, and then our last thing that we did for them, we built a simulator based on BayesiaLab software. It quantifies the impact of each attribute, increasing, decreasing overall customer experience, helps us to analyze how the attributes interact, intersect with each other, and ability to build scenarios, as you all are well aware. And then there's just this, it's our simulator that we put together. Again, you can see on the right side of the screen, the speedometer there is we can vary the different variables, awareness of advertising, not aware, dialing up the different attributes there to move that CX measure up or down. And this is a very powerful tool for our client. They love to play with this, they use it all the time, and it's one of the exciting things that we just hear about all the time. So thank you, Lionel and team, for putting that together for us. And that's it.